When we finally embrace the wholeness of who we are and allow ourselves to be loved for the whole, not the part, and not try to get rid of half of ourselves, not try to get rid of half of other people, and not put false expectation that people are supposed to be that way, life's pretty amazing.
Dr. John Demartini is a world-renowned human behavior expert.
He has studied more than 30,000 books across every academic discipline.
He has spoken in over 100 countries to audiences of 11,000 at a time.
The third law of Newton said for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Heraclitus said there's a unity of opposites. Hegel talked about the dialectic of the opposites. Zeno said the same thing. I mean, it's been talked about by great thinkers throughout the ages, but for some reason, we get indoctrinated by moral hypocrisies.
A place I'd love to start is with the mind. What is the ungoverned mind, and what are polarized emotions?
First of all, we'll start with the brain. Has a cortical and a subcortical area. The cortex, imagine a walnut. The shell of the walnut's the cortex. The little nut inside is the deep nuclei. One is for the subconscious, one is for the conscious mind, you might say, or superconscious state. And the amygdala, which is the deeper nuclei, which is the nut area of the brain, is involved in survival. And it assigns valency, positive, negative charges to perceived stimuli or events, and labels them either prey, something to seek, or predator, something to avoid. And those are the polarized emotional responses to stimuli. They're evoked from outside sources that we perceive. And anytime we're in emergencies, the amygdala, when it assigns a valency, it tends to distort and generalize it with false positives. If you're out in the wild and you see what you think is prey, it's better to be erring on the positive side that it's actually prey than to assume that it's not and miss out on food, and assume that it's a predator instead of assuming it's not, because you'll be eaten. So we have a false positive which tends to exaggerate, distort, and generalize information and not really see what's actually there, but distort it in order to protect ourselves and survive. And this is where we have systems one thinking, which is where we emotionally feel before we think. And it's for survival emergency settings predominantly. And it's where we store all emotional baggage or emotional memories in our hippocampus, and as episodic memories, where we store things in space and time in case we see something that might be a prey or predator in the future. So we store all those events. Then we got an area of the brain in the cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, that is involved in the executive center, not the desire center of the amygdala, but the executive center, where we have self-governance, where we dampen and calm down the emotional polarities and exaggerations and false positives, and calm it down and get more actual and more objective and see things as they actually are, not as we distort them for protection and for survival purposes. This executive center is the seat of reason, where we think objectively, we strategically plan, we mitigate our risks, we calm down our fantasies, and we pursue what's actually there. And we call that the path of self-actualization instead of just realization down in our amygdala. So that's systems two thinking, where we think with reason before we emotionally react. So we emotionally react before we think in systems one, and we think before we emotionally react in systems two. Our amygdala, our subcortical, or our cortical, our medial prefrontal cortex. Those are the areas of non-governance, the animal passions and affections that Aristotle talked about, the amygdala, and the reason center, which is the state of reason, where we're objective and we have mastery. When we want self-mastery, it's the strategic planning with foresight of the executive center. If we want misery, it's the pursuing of that which is unobtainable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable with the amygdala. The Buddha said the desire for that which is unavailable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable which is a byproduct to the amygdala, is the source of most people's suffering. That's why the word passion means to suffer in its etymology. It comes from pati, which means to suffer. An inspired mission is the executive center. A inspiring passion and suffering is in the amygdala desire center.
And so some people might say, okay, the amygdala is my enemy. How can I get rid of it? And I've heard about experiments where they performed an amygdalectomy or something like that on some monkeys, and they were fearless walking up to lions. But we don't want that in our lives, right? Is there a way to accept and integrate that amygdala response?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anything that we have perceived to have more pleasure than pain or more pain than pleasure is going to activate the amygdala because we're going to be seeking avoiding it. And so we need that for true survival orientations. If we really had a lion chasing us, we would need it. If we have a car about to run over us, we need it. It's not that it's to be gotten rid of, it's to be kept in check, except when real needs. And most people are trying to run their life by it instead of just keeping it moderated. But let me share a very funny story that might put this into context. Many years ago, I was living in Cardiff, California, where the mountains met the ocean there, a little surf spot there. And I went to this health food store and got me a carrot juice and was sitting there. And there was a man and two other men talking at a table, and I was listening in. And they were talking on philosophy and martial arts. And I just couldn't help but want to listen in. So I said, you mind if I listen in? I'm learning things here. So we started talking. I made a contribution to some ideas of philosophy, and the martial artist who was speaking liked what I had to say and said, we ought to get together and have an exchange. I'll teach you some martial arts. You can teach me philosophy. I said, well, that's good because I've been studying that for 50-something years. And so he comes to my house there. We had a 3-story house over the beach there. And comes to the house and he bows in front of me to teach me the first lesson in martial arts. So he said, I would like you now to attempt to kill me. And I thought, I don't have a desire to kill you. Why would I want to do that? If I succeeded, I wouldn't have anybody to teach me. He said, well, then you don't want to learn from me. If you want to learn from me, I need you to try to kill me. I'm like, what? So I said, okay. So I did a punt. And when I did, he gracefully just moved to the side, very gracefully, grabbed my hand, pulled it into a Hapkido position, pulled me off balance while I was tippy-toeing, and kissed me on the cheek and put me back on my feet. And I thought, okay. Now, I didn't have a desire to kill him, but after that, my desire to kill him went to about 8%. So I decided, okay, try again, he said. So I did this kick, forward kick first. And again, he grabbed my foot, put it in some sort of Hapkido maneuver, pulled it off balance, kissed me on the cheek, put me back on my feet. He said, you still haven't killed me, try again. The third time, I'm now about 16% interested in killing him. And my leg goes around and does a roundabout kick. And I got grabbed again by the foot, kissed on the cheek. Then he basically got in front of me and he bowed again. I bowed. And he says, here's the first lesson that I want to teach you. And this is a very powerful lesson. He said, to the neophyte perceives attack. But to the master, he perceives an invitation to dance. And I thought, whoa, I got it. He said, the master foresights things with his executive center, anticipates every possible thing that could occur, prepares and knows how to respond to it in advance, and immediately responds with foresight without even having an emotional reaction, and functions from the executive center, even though the same event, which looks like an attack, was occurring. Now, we all can function from our amygdala. It takes no training to do that. We automatically have our animal nature built in, wired in with impulses and instincts. But with training, we can myelinate and develop the executive center to such a degree that it has governance over the amygdala and we can then be invited to dance. And so if all of a sudden a snake comes up to us, if we've been trained on all possible snakes and know all the ones that are poisonous, non-poisonous, we may not even react. We'll just say, oh, that's non-poisonous snake. Hi, little friend. And go in a dance with the snake and have some fun with it. If we are frightened, it's because we're ignorant. We're not fully aware. When we're able to see both sides of an event, mitigate the risks of that, have foresight, calm down the fantasies, we are amazingly poised and present and purposeful instead of reactive, responsive, and emotional about stimuli because we're able to see both sides simultaneously. Wilhelm Wundt, father of experimental psychology, said that there's two types of contrast. Sequential contrast, where you see both sides of an event simultaneously, and sequential event contrast, where you see an event and later on you see the other side. So if you see a positive without the negative and later on you see the negative, you're going to react with an impulse. If you see a negative and later on you see the positive, you're going to react with an instinct. If you see both sides simultaneously, you're not going to react at all. You're going to act spontaneously out of a full knowing of both sides of the event without reaction. That's the difference between a master and a neophyte.
And mastery requires practice and discipline and perhaps mentorship and guidance to get to that point where you can see both sides.
That's it. And that's the difference between foresight and hindsight. Hindsight, you learn through trial and error. Foresight, you learn through mentorship and leadership and practice. I don't know if anybody has made mastery. When I think of Bruce Lee or Michael Jackson or Michael Jordan or anybody that's done something really extraordinary in sports, Phelps, right? These guys practice. I mean, I met a gentleman who started at age 3 to play the piano. By 9, he was doing concert pianos around the world. He's now 81, going on 82. He's done 78 and a half years of playing 13 hours a day the piano. He knows 8,000 songs. So he doesn't need to rehearse before he does a performance. He lives rehearsing every day. So he knows how to take every song that's been in any masterful song that's ever been produced. He knows how to do it by heart.
And people would say he's just so talented. It's not talent, it's practice and mastery.
It's like Michelangelo when the Pope asked him, how did you create that statue of David? Right? I just removed everything but David. And he said, if you knew how much work I put into my mastery, you wouldn't think it's extra special.
It's a good call to action. And I suppose mastery is not for everyone, but perhaps you can master something that will enable you to enjoy your experience of life more. And that might just be your emotions.
Everybody has something that's highest on their value. Maybe raising a beautiful child. It may be doing entrepreneurship. It may be like me, teaching or researching or poetry or debate or whatever it might be. The people who are willing to put in the hours and master their skill, they do it spontaneously because it's important to them. I'm not going to be master at cooking. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I'm not going to be a master car driver because I haven't driven a car in 35 years. I delegate anything that's low on my priorities, low on my values, and I dedicate to anything that's highest. So I teach, research, and write, and that's it. I'm outside that, I'm an idiot, but inside that, I'm pretty good.
Makes sense. Values become an important part of that conversation. I know this is a topic close to your heart. Why do you think people are so disconnected from personal values, and what can they do about it?
Mothers, fathers, preachers, and teachers, which we depend on and infatuate with and give power to, they become the sources of the superego that Freud described. A superego is an internalization of an outer authority's value systems. And we attempt to be living in the shadows of those we depend on instead of on the shoulders of those we inspired by. And we're trying to be second to being somebody else instead of first to being ourselves. As Jung described, Jung said, do you have the courage to be yourself in a world that wants you not to be? And that's really about it. The moral hypocrisies that we get indoctrinated by the mothers, fathers, and preachers and teachers that aren't really thinking. They're just reciting and parroting what they've been told through decades of tradition and convention and mores, propose things that no human being can live by. Universal laws nobody can violate, but human laws nobody can live. You're told as a kid, now be nice, don't be mean, be kind, don't be cruel, now be positive, don't be negative, be peaceful, don't be wrathful, stop fighting, and try to be a one-sided individual in a world that doesn't allow that. There's no way anybody's going to be one-sided. If I was to go to somebody and said, you are always nice, never mean, always kind, never cruel, they don't go, no, that's not true. No one is. If we video recorded any human being on planet, there's a hero and a villain. Or there's two sides to everyone. Nobody's one-sided. And everybody thinks, well, I need to get rid of half of myself to love myself, and I need to be one-sided. Well, nobody's perfect. We're not one-sided. You're not. No, the perfection is two sides. The perfection is both sides. When you have a set of values, when people support your values, you're nice as a pussycat. They can challenge your values. You can be mean as a tiger. That's the perfection of a human being. And thinking we're going to be one side and get rid of the other side is futile. Not going to happen. So we get indoctrinated about how we're supposed to be. Then we live in the fantasy that somebody's obtained something like that. We're sold that sometimes, and they haven't. When you get to know them, they thought Lance Armstrong was a hero, and they thought Bill Cosby was a hero, and they thought a lot of people, what's his name? Oscar Pistorius was a hero. They thought all these people were heroes. They're one-sided fantasies, not real. Nobody is the facade of a one-sidedness. I don't try to get rid of half of myself to love myself. I love all parts of myself. How are you going to be loved for who you are if you're trying to get rid of half of yourself? And this is what happens. We get indoctrinated by these artificial moral traps, these moral hypocrisies that nobody lives by, but everybody thinks they're going to live by. And then we wonder what's wrong with us. And then we think somebody has actually done it and pulled it off. They haven't. I've met enough gurus and teachers and celebrities on the planet. They're human beings. We're all human beings. We have both sides. I'm not a kind person or a cruel person. I'm a human being with a set of values. I can play one side or the other depending on the setting. In one day, I can go back and forth. So when we finally embrace the wholeness of who we are and allow ourselves to be loved for the whole, not the part, and not try to get rid of half of ourselves, not try to get rid of half of other people, and not put false expectation that people are supposed to be that way, life's pretty amazing. It's very fulfilling. But if you're trying to get rid of half yourself and trying to get rid of half of them and wondering why the world's not but two-sided, why is it not one-sided? It's not designed to. The third law of Newton said for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Heraclitus said there's a unity of opposites. The Hegel talked about the dialectic of the opposites. Zeno said the same thing. I mean, it's been talked about by great thinkers throughout the ages, but for some reason, we get indoctrinated by moral hypocrisies. And that traps most people in a fantasy about who they're supposed to be and not ever love who they are. And then they admire people when they think they're that way, and then they subordinate to them, and then they depend on them, and they give their power away instead of realizing that they're human beings. I really love to help people break those. I'm an iconoclast for fantasy heroes, and I'm a supporter of the people that are supposedly villains because both of them are inside us. As Nietzsche said, and Machiavelli described in The Prince, and Castiglione mentioned. I mean, it was Einstein that said, my contempt for authority is what made me the authority, not my subordination to authority.
And I think the key is loving both sides, right? Not just begrudgingly accepting one side. It's actually embracing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's appreciating it, not accepting it. Imagine this: you meet this person that you're enamored with. You're a little infatuated, and you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downside, and infatuated, and get the amygdala to have an impulse to want to eat them. They're prey. Want to eat that person, right? I want to go and have digest and rest. The parasympathetic mechanism. And but then a day, a week, a month, a few months later, you find out that they have downsides that you were overlooking and blind to. Your intuition was trying to whisper to you about them, but you ignored it with your impulse and overruled your intuition. You let your amygdala's impulse overrule your executive center's intuitive knowing. And so what happens, you eventually find out that they're not who you thought. And you feel like, well, now they're betraying your fantasy about who they were. But eventually, if you can love somebody, you're going to find out that they have things you like and dislike. Anybody who's been married can rattle off things they like and dislike in that person in seconds. But anybody who's infatuated can only see the upsides, can't see the downsides. And then when they get hit with the downsides, they're resenting it, they're frustrated, they're angry. You betrayed me. No, they didn't. They didn't. You did. You projected an unrealistic expectation on them, and now you're paying the price for being so blind. And now you can resent the person, and now you're blind to the upsides. I had a woman that was going through a divorce. She said, I've been married to a narcissist. Isn't that interesting? You didn't know this until you started the divorce process. You were thinking he was a cool guy for many years, but then when all of a sudden he left and he started divorcing you, and now he's a narcissist. And they love to put labels on people. There are no narcissists or altruists out there. There's just human beings. When they do things that challenge you and you're wanting what you want and they're not giving it to you, you're labeling them and projecting narcissism on them. They're just human beings. And we'd like to label people that way, but that's not real. So the truth is that people have both sides, and they all want to be loved for both sides. You want to be able to find somebody that loves you when you're nice and mean and kind and cruel and still love you. That's the unconditional. And that's what people want. And you can't possibly ever get that if you're trying to suppress half of yourself, and they're not going to find it if they're expecting it, because it's not going to be there. So breaking those delusions and getting past the moral hypocrisies and understand the laws of the universe as they actually are and how humans really are, liberate people from a lot of unrealistic expectation and free them up to appreciate their great life that they can't see. The depression is always a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy about how it's supposed to be, should be, ought to be. All the moral hypocrisies that you're trapped in. I'm amazed at how many people are depressed about something that's not going to ever happen. Of course it's not going to happen. My mother was supposed to be nice. I had a lady the other day, she said, my mother was supposed to be nice to me. Really? What rule says that? And when she wasn't, what did you do to irritate the heck out of her? Well, I was disobedient. Well, what do you expect? She's a human being. She's trying to run a household, try to pay the bills, try to take care of cleaning, try to do this. And you're this ornery little brat at times. And sometimes she's going to just lose her cool. That's how mothers are at times. And you know what? You're still worthy of being loved for being a mother that sometimes reacts. I don't know of a woman that hasn't reacted as a mother. Do you? Never heard it. I ask people all the time, I said, how many of you had both peace and war in your family? Every hand goes up. I've spoken at 3 peace conferences, and they've asked me to speak again in Bangkok to the United Nations next year again. And every time I go there, they don't always ask me back, because I tell them, if you want to live in a fantasy of creating world peace, go ahead. But there's no world peace out there. I can show the data. I can show the stats. The World Peace Index, the Global Peace Index monitors it every single year, exactly the amount of peace and war, and it maintains a balance year after year after year. And if you look at European borders over the last 1,000 years, there hasn't been one year that didn't have conflict and peace, both. And every relationship has peace and conflict. If you're married, you have times when you have peace and times when you have turmoil, calm and turmoil, agreements and disagreements. And sometimes they get really crazy at times. And with your kids, the same thing. Kids between kids. You ever seen a peaceful brother and sister without having conflicts? No. They have peace and war. Every family does that. And people live in a fantasy, and it's dysfunctional if it's normal. They put a dysfunction on it because they compare it to a fantasy about how life's supposed to be, and therefore they think they got a dysfunctional family instead of a perfectly functioning family, trying to teach people how to really love both sides.
What about trauma? There are so many people wandering around and they're hanging on to something that happened maybe 20 years ago, and they're letting that define them. How can we integrate our traumas and potentially redefine our story, our past?
I deal with that every single week. And I'm going to shock people by what I'm saying, but good. There is no trauma. There's an event. You make it trauma by labeling the event only negative outcomes. That's your stuff. The event. I mean, I've had people that are there, kid drove off the cliff and died, and they think, well, that's a trauma. Well, It doesn't match your fantasy about how life is supposed to be. It seems to have more negatives than positives in your first attempt to look. But if you look, you can always find upsides to it. And if you don't look and you want to stay traumatized and be a victim of your history, then go ahead. If you want to be a master of your destiny, you're going to take the time to go find the other side that you overlooked. You chose not to look at. And I'll give you 2 examples if I can. So there's a guy that comes to my Breakthrough Experience program, which is my signature program I've been doing for 37 years. And he says, I'm really, really, really feeling guilty and ashamed of myself and really bad. I said, okay, what did you specifically think you did that you should feel that way about in your mind? My brother and my family called me and said, Mom's about to die. I think you better get over. And he lived in a different city. And he had a very important business meeting the next morning at 9 something in the morning. And he was going to get on a plane by noon and be over there by 3. So he just planned it, figured he's got a day, and didn't think much about it because he did not want to pass up that business opportunity. Now, he has a different set of values than some of the other people in his family. They had maybe a family high on their values. He had business high on his values. He's not right or wrong. He just has a different set of values. He made a choice. I, chose to make sure I did that business meeting because that if I walked away from that might pass, and that's a very big opportunity, and my mom will probably live another day, and that's how he reasoned it. Well, she died that night. So he goes to the meeting, closes the deal, gets the meeting, gets over there. But this is 3 years later now. He's in my seminar. He's still beating himself up over not getting there to his mom. And he's depressed, traumatized with his own behavior, in a sense, and feeling shame and guilt. So I asked him a simple question, something nobody asked him. Nobody asked him for 3 years this question. I was just astonished. Wondered why. I said, okay, you didn't make it to your mom beforehand. What's the benefit to your mom? I can't see any. I didn't ask that. I asked, what's the benefit to your mom? I don't know. I didn't ask that. You gave me an answer within a half a second. You didn't even try to look. How did it benefit your mom that you didn't make it there until after she passed? Well, how could there be a benefit to that? There is. Let's find it. If you don't, you're going to be feeling guilty as long as you keep that perception. What's the benefit to your mom that you didn't make it? I can't think of any. It was blank. I said, I'm going to reverse the question. If you had gotten there and did not do the deal and went that night, what would have been the drawback to your mom? I asked it in psychological reverse. And he stopped. He stared. And he got a tear in his eye. And I said, okay, what just came up? He said, wow. Well, he had chills up his back and tear in his eye. My mom died in my sister's arms. My mom and sister had not talked for years. If I had been there because of the clash I had with my sister, my mom would have died not resolving the issue with her daughter, and the daughter would not have resolved the issue. Because if I would have been there, the clash between my sister because of this and myself would have kept her away. If I had been there. By me not being there, they got to resolve it. My mom died fulfilling what she was wanting and wished she could do before she died. And she stated that on numerous occasions. I wish this would be resolved. And he burst into tears and he realized if he had been there, he would have undermined his mom's wish. I said, now, what's the benefit of you not making it? I closed the deal. And I have the funds to make sure that the rest of the family doesn't have to make sure that the burial was the way it was dreamed. I also know that my mom and I loved each other. There was no question in my mind about that and her mind. We were clear. It was the sister that was incomplete. And I know my mom would have wanted me to do that now that I stop and reflect. But I couldn't see it because I didn't see what that one piece was. He says, now I'm actually grateful I didn't make it because I know that my mom died fulfilled. And that was meaningful to me. And what I did is I subordinated to the other family members who felt incomplete. And that's why they had to urgently be there, because they didn't want to go and have her die feeling guilty and incomplete. And I would have subordinated to their projection and tried to live in their values instead of be integral. And when he started to do that, he was able to rattle off the benefits, and it was just clear. And I said, this event that you thought was terrible, that you thought was traumatic, wasn't. You chose not to see the upsides. Therefore, you carried around the illusion that this was a traumatic event. And some people will immediately say, well, there is no benefits. How can you darely say that? I get that a lot. And I say, come to the breakthrough experience and hold me accountable, and don't run out of the program, and let me hold you accountable, and let me help you discover what it is. And you will find out that that thing you thought was trauma wasn't. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a lot to do with events that the collective society would think, oh my God, that would be traumatic. And you've indoctrinated into that. That would be a terrible event. And why would you even think about looking at benefits? But there's a post-traumatic growth syndrome that we can also have. And that is going in and digging and finding out how, when the door shuts, the window's open. How is this a service? How can this be a benefit to somebody's life also? Now, I got another story that I want to share. So I had this woman in Florida, probably 48 years old, I guess. And she comes at the last minute to the breakthrough experience. And like the night before, I was speaking at a church, and so she came literally from the next morning. And she was Miss Victim, running her narrative and story. You know, I was an abandoned child. My mom didn't want me, and my life has been miserable. You know, I've been raped multiple times. I've been beaten, and I've devalued myself, and I got low self-image, and it's all because my mom abandoned me. All this projection and story about her mom. And I don't buy into that. Those dramatic stories. The more dramatic it is, the more amygdala it is, the more it's distorted. I'm not denying the idea that some of those things might have happened, but it's how you interpret it. William James said the greatest discovery of his generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes and mind. You have control over perception, decisions, and actions. You don't have control of what other people do, but you have control of how you perceive what they did. You can change it. If you want to take the time, you can sit there and be victim of it, and you chose to see the downsides without the upside. That was your choice. You never looked. So anyway, I asked her, I said, okay, so your mother left. Yes. Great. What specific trait, action or inaction, did you perceive your mother not providing you that you thought you missed out on? Well, she didn't give me affection. Okay, great. Let's write that down. And what else? Well, she didn't give me guidance. If I would have had my mother there, I would be happy. See, that's the fantasy people have. No, a lot of people have mothers that are around them and smothering them all the time, and they have the new sets of crazies. There are people always think there's a greener pasture over there. So I said, all right, so let's take the first in affection. So whatever you didn't get from your mom, nothing's missing. Who provided it? Nobody. I didn't ask that. I didn't ask for nobody. I asked who provided it. Nothing's missing. Look. And she started going, well, my aunt. My aunt gave me affection. Great. Who else? My grandmother. Great. Who else? My best friend's mom. Who else? My other best friend's mom. Who else? A teacher. I said, so when your mom left, you can see now that these people stepped up and filled in that gap and provided you the affection that you sought. Yes. Now, when I add all of those people together, is the quantity equal to what you imagine your mom providing? Yes. So the quantity is there, but you still preferred it in your mom's form, but you got it in this form. Great. What was the benefit of these people providing it and not your mom? Well, I got to learn a different language. The people, the best friends had Well, my aunt had more income and we got to go places and do things, had better clothes. My mom was not, highly educated and didn't have as much income. And my best friends took me on trips, just like a vacation with a family. I said, and the teacher, gave me a lot of attention and helped me. And I'm relatively able to read and do things because of my teachers. And we stacked up the benefits. And then I asked, what would be the drawback if your mom had given it to you? If your mom had stayed and provided you that affection. Never did she ask that question. She just assumed that if she'd got it, life would be happy. These are the fantasies people make. And whenever you compare your current reality to a fantasy, you can never win. Because that's just a fantasy. Fantasies aren't real. They're assuming a positive without a negative. But everything has got it, positive and negative. If you get dating somebody, they got positives and negatives. Your mom would have had positive and negatives. But you created a fantasy because she wasn't there about who she could have been, would have been, should have been. So I said, what would have been the drawback if your mom had been there? Suddenly she stares like that guy did. And she get tears in her eyes. Then she said, wow, I just realized something that my aunt said to me when I was 4, when my mom left. I said, what was it? Wow. My aunt said, your mom had bipolar condition. And she put you in a bathtub, put in the water, didn't realize it got hotter and hotter and almost scalded you. And then you almost drowned because she forgot you. And when she came and found you, she was so distraught. She came to me, her sister, and said, my condition, I don't think I'm capable of raising this beautiful child. This child deserves a better thing than what I can offer. Will you help me? And gave her to the sister and stayed away because she didn't want to have her see her in that condition and think that was the mother's, that's what she was fated with. The mother gave her away out of love, not out of, now this is back a number of years back. They have different treatments and different things for bipolar and lithium and stuff like that. But in those days, she was not really treated well. Anyway, when she realized that, and she realized that what she got was greater than what her mother could have provided. A mother will give up a child if she thinks that child will get a better opportunity. Because I met a woman from India that lived in a slum and gave up her child to a family that could give more to that child than what that mother could provide. And she cried walking away from that child. But at the same time, she knew that was an act of love for the child because she knew that child had a better opportunity to survive than that slum. So when she got that and she realized that their mother loved her and didn't really abandon her, and that's the narrative and story that she made up in her head because she needed to make that up because where's the mom when everybody else has got a mom? She had to come up with these things that in kind of distort the story and not hear but what she wanted to hear to make up that story. She made a post-traumatic stress. Then she made herself feeling I'm unworthy, I don't deserve. So she hung out with people that treated her that way. And she got raped and she got beaten and she got all those things that were because of those perceptions. When she had that shift that day, she made a commitment that she was going to do something extraordinary with her life and find her mom and thank her and hug her mom. She went on to write a book. She went back and educated herself further. She was a different person on a new trajectory because the second you change your perception of reality and the events that occur in your life, you change your trajectory. Your perceptions impact your decisions and actions. And now I'm special instead of I'm a throwaway. That made a difference. Now, was she traumatized? She thought she was for 44 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't give people the power to run that narrative. Because all they're doing to do is play blame game and victim game. And I haven't seen that really empower people. What I've seen is when people take the events and turn it into opportunities and find the window that opened when the door's shut, and find out the other person that provided what you thought was missing and be resourceful, you have post-traumatic growth or so-called traumatic growth. I've had people actually go back. I had a lady that was stabbed, attempted rape. People found and heard her screaming, and they stopped it from happening. And she had 5 years of psychiatric care and drugs and everything else over this event, and put the guy in prison. She comes to the breakthrough experience, and she was still in fear and anxiety and having mace, and carried a gun, and was frightened when she go down the steps every single day, worrying about somebody at the bottom of the step, because that's where it happened. And she had intrusive thoughts and had difficulty sleeping and all the basic stuff from running a story and keeping a story like that. In the breakthrough experience, I asked her another side of the story. Where has she done some of the same behaviors? What's the benefits of the behaviors? How did it serve her? What did it catalyze in her? And boy, it catalyzed business opportunity. It catalyzed, I'm not going to depend on guys. I became financially capable of standing on my own 2 feet. And I mean, she was driven and influential and everything else, and she never saw the correlation. When she finally saw the correlation and was absolutely grateful for what had happened, strange as that may sound to people, I don't really care if people comprehend that or not. I'm telling you, this happens every friggin' week. I see it. She went to the prison and thanked him, and we developed a relationship and said, I want you to know that what you did also had an upside, because I've now transformed my life because of it. It would put me on a personal development. It made me go into study spirituality. It made me do meditation classes. It made me want to know, not use my looks and try to be as pretty all the time. I went to academics. I moderated some of my feminine extremes, and I've got a nice balance today. And I just want you to know that this was my fear and anxiety of these things happening came upon me. You know, the more I was surrounded by people trying to overprotect me from these various events, drew it right into my life. And you liberated me, and I'm now more strengthened because of it. And right now, I'm literally grateful for this happening. I just want you to know that. I know that you'll be coming out someday. I want you to know you don't have to be tortured by judgments by people. I'm not saying that I'm your best friend. I'm just saying I just want to thank you for what I did get, because you may never have seen it. And that'll help you rehab yourself, which happened.
Wow.
That helped him.
Incredible. And you do this every week and hear these types of stories. And it's always the polarity. I mean, you can find it. You know, my mother was cruel, or this happened at school, there was a bully. But if you flip it to the other side, it made you more able to deal with pressure.
It's your challengers that make you entrepreneurship, not the supporters. Supporters make you juvenilely dependent. Now, I got another example. I got to give another example.
Please.
I'm sitting in Quebec, and I just finished a program. It wasn't the Breakthrough Experience, another program. And we finished around 6:00, and the restaurant was opening at 7. And because in Europe, sometimes they eat late, and in Quebec, it's sort of like a European place. So we're sitting in kind of the club lounge bar area. Now, I don't drink, but there's like a little bar area before the restaurant. And this guy comes up to a bar and sits on one of the stools. Just not a super handsome guy, but just an average guy, bloke, right? Just comes up to the bar. A few minutes later, this really beautiful, attractive 9 or 10 comes up and sits two seats over. And you couldn't miss her. I mean, every guy in the place, just, like a magnet, noticed this chick. And this guy who's sitting there, he's on a swivel stool, and he leans 45 degree in his chair so he can sit in a way where he can look at her without looking, over his shoulder at her like this. And he's just checking her out. You could see it. I'm watching it. So we're all kind of laughing because we watched the girl walk up, and we watched the guy, maneuver just in case he might get somewhere with it. It's really quite interesting. And human behavior is fun to watch. So it gets to be now 7:00. And they opened the door from the restaurant, and we started to get up. And the guy, he was 10, 12 feet away. We could hear him. he leans over to the pretty girl because he was hesitant to say anything because I think he was thinking, a pretty girl like this probably got a guy she's meeting, so I don't want to rush this and then intrude. But finally, when the restaurant opens, he leans over to her and he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, but I notice you're sitting by yourself and I'm about to go to dinner. If you have nothing going on tonight, I'd love to invite you to dinner and get to know who you are." And he was very polite about it. It was nothing aggressive or intrusive or arrogant. He was just a really humble guy. And she just goes, "God, no, I would never go out with a guy like you. Oh, that's disgusting." And she just slammed him, And we're all going, oh, man, just imagine what he was going through. And he's like, okay. And he kind of gets off the stool and throws a $20 bill or whatever it was on the thing and starts to go towards the restaurant. Well, I was headed towards the restaurant. I quickly walked up to the guy and with a group, right? I said, "I just saw what happened, man. She just nailed you, guy." He goes, "Yeah." I was like, "She's like really overreacted. I just asked her if she'd like to go to dinner and she just slammed me." And I said, "I'm involved in the field of, human behavior. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" He goes, "What kind of questions?" I said, "Go to the moment just seconds ago where she said what she said and slammed you and really, really criticized you." And he goes, "You want me to go back there in my mind?" I said, "Yeah, just close your eyes for a second." He's standing right there. We're standing there and the group's right next to me. And we're about to go to the restaurant. I said, "Just stand there and go there." He goes, "Yep." And hear what she's having to say. Hear what you said and look at her response. Yeah. And his face makes a facial expression just like it did. Like, ugh. And I said, at that moment, when she's slamming you and criticizing you and putting you down and saying, "I would never do that," and she's kind of like degrading you. Who had you on a pedestal? Close your eyes because your mind can never have perception without contrast. Contrast is necessary for perception. And if you're in a completely black room, like a king's chamber of a pyramid, you can't perceive, can't see anything. If you're completely whited out in snow, you can't see anything. You have to have a contrast. So if you actually hear and smell and you taste and you're sensing things, it's based on contrast. So I said, at that moment, she's slamming you and criticizing you and putting you down and rejecting you. Close your eyes and get really present because in the moment of perception, in order to have that perception, you had to have the perception of the opposite, equal and opposite. And the second he got present, at first he says, "I don't hear anything. I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Just get really present. Who praised you, thought you were above, thought you were special, thought you were somebody they'd want to spend time with, et cetera, at that moment?" And the moment he got really present, he goes, my mother." I said, "What did she just say? Go back to that moment when the girl slammed you. What did your mother say?" He says, "Yeah, my mom came into my mind." That's interesting. She said, "Son, she's way beneath you. You deserve much better than that." So at the moment something's slamming, there was somebody enorming him, putting him on a pedestal, thinking he was greater than he was as she was negating him, putting him down. Nature has a way of keeping us authentic. And anytime we buy into this praise, we also have criticizers to get us back into authenticity. And when we get criticized, we have to have praisers to keep us in authenticity. It's part of a social feedback system. Pride before the fall, humility before the rise. So I said, exactly at that moment, can you see that your mom was playing out the opposite role? And he says, what's interesting is I also hear a whisper of my grandmother. She thinks I'm like the best thing on the planet. I said, can you see that the moment she was degrading you and negating you, your mother and grandmother came into your consciousness and put you on a pedestal, thought you were special, and she's way beneath you, you deserve more than that. She goes, yeah. And once I got both of them there simultaneously, he got a tear in the eye. And he goes, so at that exact moment, my mind had both. Yes. But you saw one, which seemed traumatic, and you overlooked the other, which was ecstatic. Now, as long as you get addicted to this one, you will attract this one. Because as long as you're addicted to your mommy's praise and stay a little boy, depending on mommy and grandma's praise, you're going to have a woman come into your life to kick your ass to make you grow up. And he says, you just nailed my dynamic with women. I said, you got a mom that's overprotecting and you need somebody to set you free from that dependency. And there are women are coming in and giving you a hard time until you do. If you set yourself free, the women will calm down back and balance it out. Now, then I asked her I said, we're going to dinner if you'd like to join us. He joined us. Boy, I nailed him on the dinner. We ordered the dinner and I said, now go to a moment when your mom was mad or in hell at you. You did something that really challenged your mom and she really, really, really got you, really nailed you. And he goes, okay, you there? Go back to that moment right there. Yeah. She's upset. You're doing something to challenge her. She doesn't think you're the greatest thing in the world at that moment. Yep. Great. Who had you on a pedestal? Who was praising you at that moment when your mom was putting you down? He goes, my sister. My sister defended me and started backing me up and saying a bunch of nice things about me at that moment. Mom was putting me down. I said, you never get one without the other. A person who's fully conscious and aware of the synchronicity and synthesis of complementary opposites liberates themselves from the intrusive thoughts of the things that we admire and despise that distract us with our amygdala and create the insomniac state that we can't sleep at night because we got these intrusive thoughts that occupy space and time in our mind. When you see both sides, you're liberated. And there's no trauma or ecstasy. The ecstasy draws the trauma draws the ecstasy to balance out the equation. Once we see both simultaneously, we're poised, we're present, we're purposeful, and we're patient. And we're profoundly, purposeful individuals. We're authentic. Authenticity is when we see both sides within ourselves and don't put ourselves up on a pedestal or pit. If we go around, the girl was putting herself in a pit because she thought there were more negatives than positives. The guy was, by his mom, had him up on a pedestal and he thought there were more positives and negatives. So therefore, if you have the praise, you think the criticism hurts. It only hurts because you're addicted to the praise.
I love the stories. Thank you, Dr. Demartini. Any final thoughts for someone navigating a changing world? Consciousness is something many people aspire to upgrade if you can, or at least expand or protect in this changing world. We live with AI, social media algorithms that are hijacking our attention. Any thoughts for someone out there who wants to stay grounded in this changing world?
Whatever they're perceiving, find its opposite. You're grounded the moment you see both sides simultaneously. When I have people that tell me, I had a guy that was attacked in South Africa, very high profile guy, had major company, one of the biggest in the country, very, very, very astute, wealthy man. And he was being absolutely attacked in almost every media, newspapers, television, everything else, because he happened to be doing business with a business that also happened to be doing business with somebody that was corrupt in the country. So somehow there was a correlation and he got it named. And the higher you go, the fewer the businesses, you can't avoid it. You can't go to the top without having somebody in there that's going to have somebody that's connected. It's just a numbers game. So he was being attacked and he was really, really addicted to the idea that he's not a corrupt person. He's very, very dedicated. He's trying to do a thing and it really hurt his feelings. And so all I did is I took him through 79 moments when he felt attacked that week and found out who was the praisers, who were the supporters, and who was backing him up to balance it. And as we got through, probably about 6 of them, he was already starting to shift. By the time we got through and he started laughing, he goes, there's nothing to be concerned about. I said, no, there never is. The only reason why we're concerned is because we have incomplete awareness. That's our ignorance. When we're fully conscious, there's just grace. We see the order. Claude Shannon, in his information theory, said that disorder, entropy, tendency to go from order to disorder, means missing information, and dissipation of heat and missing information. Ignorance is missing information. It gets us all heated up. If we go and ask the right question, because a quality of our life is based on quality of the questions we ask, if we ask questions that make us conscious of what we were unconscious of, and see the other side of the equation and balance the equation. It's a mathematical equation. And see both sides simultaneously. There's nothing there but something to be thankful for. That's the key to mastery.
Dr. Demartini, thank you so much. People will undoubtedly want to explore your work. All of the links will be in the show notes. Is there anywhere you would like them to go in particular?
They can simply go to drdemartini.com if they'd like to find out what I'm up to doing. And we do programs all the time. The Breakthrough Experience. And there's the website and keep people busy the rest of their life. There's so much on it.
It certainly can. Dr. Demartini, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me on your show. Appreciate it.